Half a day, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to Agu'ot, a Fanachu podcast series amplifying queer, feminist, and gendered voices in Guåhan. Each month, we feature filmmakers, artists, activists, and students to share their enriching experiences on topics including identity, queerness, feminism, arts, mental health, and community building. The name Agu'ot, meaning to hold each other in CHamoru, reflects the intention to uplift and hold a collective space for marginalized voices. I'm your host, Helen Yeung, a Hong Kong Chinese queer feminist scholar, community organizer, mother, illustrator, and zine maker from Aotearoa, New Zealand, now living in Guåhan. I hope you enjoy this episode. Buenas, everyone. Thank you for supporting our first ever episode of the podcast last month. On today's episode, I'll be talking to Maria Sol Dueñas Marques, a young CHamoru artist and activist in Guåhan. Maria goes by she, they pronouns and creates amazing acrylic paintings on intimate, taboo topics, which center her personal experiences, pop culture, and the cinematic nature of the island's landscape. Welcome to the show, Maria.
Happy day. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm very excited and yay.
Yeah, full disclosure, we spent almost an hour trying to sort out technical difficulties because I'm not familiar with recording software. So thanks, Maria, for your patience, and it's really nice meeting you. Yeah, how's your day going?
My day's doing all right. Didn't do a lot. I painted a little bit, but I so little, like it was like a stem of a flower, that's it, and I was like, I'm done. I had fun fixing up the system with you. I feel like this is like real woman in STEM moment, like technological mastery.
Yeah, that's real feminism. Yeah, I'm glad you had an eventful day. It seems I only wrote like 3 sentences of my doctoral research today.
Nice.
And I spent most of the time trying to keep my daughter entertained in our garden, and she ripped out all my spring onions. So yeah, we're trying to learn to be farmers together, me and her.
That's sweet.
So to begin, I guess I wanted to ask you, what's it like being a young queer CHamoru artist in Guåhan? Because I know you're still in high school as well, and we talked about that earlier.
Well, I definitely can really only talk about my own experience. It's a complicated question that takes over like a lot of intersectioned identities, you know what I mean? To be a young CHamoru queer artist in Guam can mean a lot of different things. At least for me, I can say that being a young CHamoru artist, I mean, like, it's definitely fun. I mean, to say the least. It's also very heartbreaking, but, you know, Guam is such a beautiful place to live as an artist, at least, that you're never really short of inspiration being surrounded by so much nature. However, of course, with our colonial history, and it's just been so embedded, like the stigma against, you know, being queer and stuff, and how identifying that way, that it can also be very painful. And, you know, Guam being so small, I mean, just being on Guam, it's almost like everybody knows everything about what everybody's doing. So it all just kind of culminates into some like huge like thing that's also just so compounded, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think I kind of understand that because I've been here for almost 2 years, and you know, the island's quite small compared to where I'm from, I guess, or lived in my whole life. So it's quite different for me as well in terms of finding community, like I shared on my last episode. And so tell me more about what, I guess, queerness means to you as an Indigenous CHamoru person.
Well, to me, I think like queerness is something that is very fluid, and it honestly can mean the same thing to all different kinds of people. I don't feel like there's anything about my Indigenous identity that is specifically queer or specifically not queer. That's really up for me to decide. I do look towards a lot of like the things that I've learned about my history and my ancestors, you know, like learning that Chamorros actually had gender neutral pronouns that kind of lost touch. I mean, most of our language we kind of lost touch as, you know, because there was a time when it was actually illegal to speak Chamorro, and so people would teach their children, they wouldn't teach their children Chamorro anymore, they'd teach them English, and, you know, little things like that, like learning, wow, there was actually gender neutral pronouns in CHamoru, and wow, the gender roles that people were expected to uphold aren't the same as the ones we're expected to uphold now. And those are things that make me, I guess, feel in touch with my queer and indigenous identity.
Yeah, wow. I guess for me as well, like understanding that, I guess it's very different as like a migrant or settler of colour in Guåhan, and even in New Zealand, Aotearoa, where I was originally living. I guess like I've been embarking on a journey to learn more about what queerness means for my Chinese identity as well. And although it's very much different, it's also similar in many ways in that, for example, in Cantonese, we use gender neutral pronouns, and, you know, we only had more like male and female binaristic kind of pronouns after colonization and Western influence as well. So I think there's some parallels there, but like it's something, you know, I'm also constantly kind of navigating as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. But that's so special though, to think about the ways, like, because I started my thing saying, I mean, like, there's really nothing like inherently indigenous about being queer, but there's also nothing really inherently queer about being indigenous. I mean, they're like two things that kind of intersected many times, and because of that, there's a lot of similarities between different cultures, and that's one of them is that the, you know, gender neutral pronouns in a lot of people's languages, and I think that's really cool, and I did not know that, and so thank you for teaching me about that.
Yeah. Do you think there's any differences between like diasporic communities and Indigenous communities in terms of like experiencing queerness on island, or like how these communities differ?
I believe so. I think, well, it really, like, do you mean like Indigenous and diasporic? Like, I mean, like diaspora as in like Indigenous people who, like, you know, became diaspora or like grew up in diaspora, because I do think that like being on Guam, as I was noting earlier, like the kind of cultural embedded homophobia that we have because of the Christian and Catholic presence here. I mean, Catholicism definitely, I feel like, has affected, you know, the Guam Chamorro culture a lot. And that has really impacted what the, I guess, like a queer experience would be like on Guam, because a lot of people don't feel like they can go out and be who they are because Guam's so small. They can't drive out to a city and attend Pride. You know, we have Pride in the middle of Hugua, right across the church, you know, like it's like, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's very interesting, because it's, I guess for me, it's very different understanding, like being surrounded by like Asian migrants back home. I'm just, yeah, it's very different in terms of like in Aotearoa, it's not really like inherently religious or like Catholic. So coming here for me was like a culture shock as well, in terms of how ingrained like I guess gender roles and like religion has impacted how we see queerness, and how it plays out in families as well.
Yeah, it's definitely really sad, especially since Guam is a very family oriented. I mean, I'm sure you like can resonate with that. Like from a lot of Asian families tend to have like really family kind of values. And if your family is against something that is a part of your identity, that can really break your heart and make you feel like, you know, you just like don't belong. If I can't belong in my family, like where do I go, you know? And I'm luckily enough, like I've never felt that way, at least with my immediate family. But I know a lot of people personally who have kind of isolated themselves because they didn't feel like they could be themselves around their family or around really anybody else on the island.
Do you think that's the case for your peers?
Well, yeah, like some of my family is okay with, some of my peers, their family is more, I guess, accepting, while other people's families, I have like a really close friend of mine whose parents aren't exactly outwardly homophobic. They don't want to talk about it either. You know, a big part of it is also like, as opposed to, I've known of like people in the West, like in America, whose parents are extremely homophobic, and they'll be very upward about it. They'll be like, you know, they'll tell them straight to their face and stuff. But in Guam, again, since it's so small and everybody knows everything, if your kid is like, comes out and you're not okay with that, you also don't want to be known as the parent that threw them out. If anything, you're just going to tell them, you know, like, hush about that, like, don't talk about that, or at least don't talk about it with the family, and I don't want to hear any more about it, you know. come on, I made karu, you know? Like, like I had a friend who, you know, he wrote a poem about eating breakfast with his family the day after he came out, and they just acted like nothing happened, and they never talk about it anymore. And it's just this awkward tension where it's like, okay, so I'm not going to bring it up and you're not going to either. Bye, you know?
Yeah. I think something similar would happen for my family as well, because they're quite like conservative in a different, like non-religious, more like an Asian patriarchal way. Yeah, so that's interesting to think about as well. And yeah, it's sad to hear that it's like that for some of your peers too.
Yeah, it's really sad. I'm really glad. I stay mostly with my mom, and she's very accepting, and she's really open to learning more. She's not queer, but a lot of people in my family are, and so because of that, my mom has taken the time to, you know, to understand them as our elders, and that it's also helped. I don't know if it's because of my elders, that's why, but, you know, she's definitely taken time to understand them and understand me. My father isn't very, like, he's not, like, homophobic or anything, but he's very, like, I guess close-minded. Like, he thinks about, like, the world in terms of just, like, his own, like, existence. Like, he was saying, like, oh, why you can't expect me to, like, keep up with people's pronouns. If you look like this, I'm gonna call you this. And it's like, Dad, you do realize, like, there have been people who have, like, identified as gender fluid and otherwise for so many years before you were born. And it's, you know, he's like, it's only recently that we've had to do pronouns. That's actually not true. It's been for so long, and just Western influence has caused us to kind of abandon that and think of it as, like, you know, sexual deviance almost. And it's a really good thing that we're actually reconnecting with these histories, and it shows that you just aren't, well, I'm not going to tell my dad he's not educated, but it shows that you're not educated if you think that this is new, you know?
Mm-hmm. So how do you handle it when something difficult arises with your dad, or how do you feel like you can process it and kind of do you approach them and talk about how this is what you could read, or
Well, I can't tell my dad to read anything per se, but, you know, I do my best that I can to explain at least that there is a history of these things. And I try to remember, like, it's not that my dad is, like, trying to, like, you know, in his eyes, obviously he's older than me because he's had so much experience. But I've also come to learn that a big part of, I guess, learning isn't just, like, learning more information per se, but also, like, learning what you've already learned. This is like unlearning things. Does that make sense? Like, a big part of learning is, like, unlearning things. And one way that I've, like, learned this, like, this is, like, a little bit of, like, a metaphor, is my mom was driving and giving me this driving lesson, and she's like, oh, recently they put up a stop sign here, so just be careful, because I always run through it because I forget there's a stop sign. And I'm just like, Mom, but I've never known this not to have a stop sign. All that I've been living, there's always been a stop sign here. So that's never something that's going to come up with me. And
okay, so we had to take a quick break just now, a phone call break, and we're back, and we're going to talk more with Maria about her experiences of queerness in her family. I guess the next question I had for you lined up was, you shared with me in your bio that you identify as bisexual. What does being bisexual mean to you?
So, of course, I mean, anything that I say and anything that I feel is not going to be, like, the complete, like, prototype of what that has to mean to somebody else. I mean, I feel like that's the basis of, like, queer identity really, is, like, figuring out what it means for you and how that, like, looks in action. And for me, I identify as bisexual, although some people have told me, like, oh, does that mean, like, you wouldn't date somebody if they identified as transgender, or, like, you only date two people? I mean, there's, like, a bi in it. It's, like, two. I guess I've always said that I identified as bisexual because it's, like, the things that I find in attractive in masculinity and attractive in femininity are different to me. I have contemplated identifying as pansexual, but I mostly just say that I identify as bisexual because I've been doing it for so long that it just feels, like, comfortable. It just feels like the right thing to say. But also because, again, like, there are distinct traits, I guess, that I find attractive in a masculine identity, a masculine presenting person, as opposed to some things I'll find attractive in a feminine presenting person. But that isn't to say that I feel like I wouldn't be attracted to someone if they were gender fluid. Actually, it's, like, the opposite. I really like androgynous people, so yeah.
No, I feel the same. Like, I think before I was trying to, or when I was younger and a teenager, I was like trying to scramble to find ways to describe my own identity as well. And, you know, I think at this stage I relate to being pansexual, but also, I don't know, it's just like constantly shifting, and I guess that's fine.
Yeah.
So do a lot of your peers like openly identify with, you know, different sexualities and genders as well?
Yeah, actually, it's been really beautiful to see, because I know that like it's really not been till too recently that a lot of people have felt safe coming out about who they are, and I guess like trying different things out, and, you know, just being okay for how it goes if it doesn't work out, and just being along for the ride. And it's been so beautiful. Ever since I was younger, my best friend told me that she was gay. It was her way of saying she was attracted to girls. Later on, had gone on to identify as pansexual. And that was like one of the things that kind of, I guess, opened that up to me. Her older sister was the one who kind of explained a lot of these things to us, and we learned about all these different kinds of labels. And, you know, now I'm in high school, and most of the people, at least in my friend group, identify as queer one way or another. And, you know, I think it's just very beautiful, because there's not just one idea of what it means to be, like, I guess, gay or lesbian or bisexual or whatever. Like, people aren't like, oh, you know, he's a little interesting. Like, is he really gay though? You know what I mean? Like, no one's really out here trying to like disprove anybody. And I think that's great, like, that we've come to this point.
Yeah, and do you notice around, like, I guess, young people, is there still a lot of stigma and bullying going on with the LGBT plus community?
Well, there's definitely going to be people who don't really understand anymore. I have never really been bullied by younger people more than I've been bullied by actual adults. Yeah. But my cousin was telling me about how some of the people at our school make fun of her for being transgender, but it's like they're kind of scared to a certain extent. It's like the way that they're quote unquote bullying definitely manifests more in like talking to each other and just like dirty looks and stuff. But a lot of bullies at this point are too like they've become so like they just are so face to face with their own hatred that they're probably like embarrassed. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. It's embarrassing at that point to be mean, you know?
Yeah, I definitely relate to the part where you said the biggest bullies are like adults. You know, being a queer person as well. Like, I think my inner child is like deeply hurt by a lot of the things that my community has said around like my appearance and things like that growing up.
Yeah, it is really sad. I'm glad that like as a younger person, I was saying earlier something about how like it's definitely about unlearning a lot of the things that we've learned as a younger person. We've kind of like, well, at least for me as a younger person, it's been great to just, you know, see that, like, you know, a lot of the things that, like, okay, I need to reword this. Okay, so as I was saying earlier, there's a lot of things that we have to unlearn, and it's just great as a younger person, the way that we kind of have this, like, blank canvas, or at least, like, that's how it is for everybody. And we're at this point where it's, like, bullying wasn't really normalized for a lot of us, at least for the most part. You know, even if queerness and transgender identities and gender fluid identities and two-spirit people and all of those things, even if those weren't really normalized, overall bullying is looked down upon. So people aren't really out here trying to bully people anymore, you know?
Yeah. No, that's really good.
Yeah.
You know, I'm happy that younger queer people aren't, you know, being bullied or like facing a lot of like, I guess, overt like discrimination or like nasty attacks, because that wasn't the case for me when I was in high school, maybe around like, I don't know, God knows how long ago that was. But in high school, like, I remember that I went to a predominantly white high school, and there were a lot of just like, you know, a lot of transphobic, a lot of homophobic jokes being made all the time. And then I remember when I cut my hair short and wanted to present like androgynous, people would be like, why do you look like a boy? And it would be like, I don't know, I just feel so bad about being myself. And yeah, I'm really glad to hear that it's less like that, you know, nowadays. And do you think that's because of like technology as well and social media and people just becoming more aware?
Well, first and foremost, I just want to say, like, that's so awful, and I'm so sorry you had to go through that. I do think a big part of that, it might also be social media. I mean, we don't really know. Like, kids are still kind of mean. It's just like they're so much quieter about it, and it's been a lot easier for people who I guess at one point felt like they didn't belong and felt like misfits and all that. Now we're able to go online and like build these communities around people who are like us, and see music and media made by people, and see people like us on these big screens doing these big things, and it's like, oh shoot, maybe I can do something.
Yeah, definitely a lot of great like role models in like music industry, and like
definitely,
yeah, with film and everything as well.
Film is great. Art is amazing.
Yeah, so since we're talking about art as well, when did you discover your love for painting?
Well, art has always been something that has been a part of my identity. I've always been a very creative person. Ever since I was younger, like my dad and my mom really fostered creativity and individual thinking within me. I do feel like it really would have been anything. The reason why painting was like my main trade, I guess, was just because it was drawing, at least, was always there. No matter where I was at, there was always going to be a pencil and a paper that I can use. I really wanted to learn how to play cello. I really wanted to learn how to do music. I'm doing music right now, but there's a lot of things that I really, I guess, like wanted to learn, and it's just that drawing has always been there for me.
What kind of music are you learning right now?
Okay, I play guitar, and I've been playing guitar since I was a freshman, and it's been really fun and really exciting because I felt like all the times that I wanted to learn music but didn't get the opportunity to were like these deep grievances that I like held against everybody else that it had nothing to do with them, and I'm so glad that I've just been able to okay, that was not the question, but the music that I've been learning. Well, I do guitar, and I guess I call the genre that I play something of like folk, kind of bluesy vocals influenced by pop.
Cool. Are there any artists that like influence what you're making right now?
Well, right now, like my songwriting, the like last song that I wrote was giving very like grungy kind of. It was like a lot of like major chords, and I was very angry, and it was very inspired by like Paramore and like that, because those are the feelings I felt. The song I wrote before that was giving like Etta James, just like strong, like I just tear it out of my like chest, the heart in my like what is left of my broken heart. I'm very inspired by singers like Etta James, Janis Joplin, who sing from a very core part of their like soul. I really like Japanese Breakfast and Mitski for like their lyrical. Yes, I love Mitski.
I did a little gasp there because I also love Mitski and Japanese Breakfast.
I love like their writing, and I love like I guess like who they feel like they are, who they write themselves out to be resonates a lot with who I feel like I am, because I'm still trying to figure out who I am. And when I listen to their music, I just feel so seen, and I want to have that ability to write music that people hear, and instead of being like starstruck and like, wow, she's a celebrity, I want people to hear my music and think, wow, she's just like me,
Yeah, like I think when I have a bad day, I just kind of like curl up in a ball and play Nobody by Mitski, or like Your Best American Girl.
Oh,
it's
no, not that
one. Yeah, and I just feel all the feels, and I totally get it that, making music that's just like relatable, and it's like, I don't know, it's just so, it just reaches the deeper part of your feels, I guess.
I guess considering music and all that, well, there's definitely a lot of queer artists who have also used music as like a sense of transformation. I mean, there's like a lot of genres that I was saying. Like, you asked me what kind of music do you play, I was like, whoa, like slow down, that's a complicated question, because music is also like slipping into a lot of these different identities. Like sometimes you'll play a song that feels very soft and feels very like sweet, and like kind of just, I feel so small and I feel so sad. But sometimes you're going to play a song that makes you feel really powerful. Or sometimes you're going to play a song that makes you feel like no one's ever going to love you. Or like, you know what I mean? Like there's all these different kind of identities that you can slip into. And I think the best part about, I guess, a song, it's like you really get to really find like a part of your voice that's like, whoa, I didn't even feel like I could sound like that. I sound so angry. I sound so sad. I sound like so in love. And I like really like that.
Yeah, so I guess moving on, you submitted a few paintings to the Agu'ot zine, and yeah, tell us more about it.
Okay, so I'm so sorry, but you gotta refresh me. I remember I put in Cadena de Amor, and I put in the patron saint of political status. Did I put in the third one?
It was you playing guitar in the bedroom.
Oh yeah, okay, that one is called bar chord. Thank you for reminding. I'm so sorry that I but I remember exactly what painting that is. So about those three paintings, they're definitely very complicated. I will start with bar chord, which is the one in the bedroom because it's like the most simple one. So that one is just me playing guitar in my room. Mostly it's like, I guess like, first off, as like a teenager, your room is such a big and important part, I feel like, of your identity. It's like the first place that you can build your own space, and it's one of the most familiar places in your like life. Even with the pandemic, so many people were in their rooms like all of the time that even if they weren't even a teenager at the time, it was still like a similar feeling of being in your room all the time. And I guess that was me playing guitar. As you know, I was just talking about how like music was such a large, not insecurity in my life, but a large grievance that I had. And during the pandemic, at least if there was some good that came out of it, I got a lot of like, I guess, practice with guitar. And, you know, I was just listening to music all the time, and it really kind of built up my identity as a music appreciator as opposed to really a music player. Yeah.
Yeah, that reminds me, like, living out of the bedroom, like, you know, during the pandemic. When I first arrived in Guåhan, I only had, like, a suitcase of clothes, and everything I was planning to ship over took, like, half a year to get here. So I was just, I felt so, like, I didn't know what I was doing during the pandemic as well, and, you know, in the bedroom, and just, I just felt like there was no sense of identity, like, none of my artwork was here, and, yeah, it was just a very difficult time. But I totally relate to what you say about, like, being a teenager and, like, kind of just, like, living in your bedroom and learning all these different things and spending time there.
Yeah. Man, that's so, I could never imagine what it like feel like, you know, to move somewhere and you don't get to have all your things. I feel like one of the most important things is like decorating your room and decorating your space. It's just like such a special and sacred practice, you know, and taking things down from the walls that you don't feel like represent you anymore and putting new things up. Mm-hmm. Cleaning your room is just such a great metaphor for like how you should be living your life. You know what I mean? You know?
Yeah, I love that. So tell us more about the other pieces.
So the second one, and this is going to be in a great order. The second one, Cadena de Amor, is definitely more heavier. I didn't want to start with this one because it's just like, you know, it's very heavy, but it represents like a lot of things. The reason I painted it was to, I guess, word out and explain these feelings that I had when I was, you know, considering pursuing getting justice for an experience with sexual assault after an abusive relationship, and just, you know, like all of what makes up my identity as a, you know, queer CHamoru artist and how that manifests all in one thing. Because yeah, they're all like different, I guess, identities and different experiences that intersect in one place, but in that one place that they in that one place that they intersect, it's just this whole new thing that's almost something completely different than the points that made it up. And the Cadena de Amor is a invasive vine that you see all over Guam. If you like look at the painting, it's a very like easy to remember. It's a very familiar plant. You see it all over the place, and it makes me so heartbroken because people will see it and just be like, "Oh, it's so pretty," because it is so pretty, and never really see anything that's wrong with it because they don't know that underneath all the vines, there's actually all these trees, usually trees that are native to Guam, that are being suffocated by the vine, and you know, eventually just end up dying underneath it. And I felt like that was a good metaphor, I guess, to describe how I felt at the time, you know, and how maybe other people might feel, you know, how, you know, it's pretty, it feels regular. You just see it every day that there doesn't seem to be anything wrong with it unless you really understand what's happening. And that's how I felt at the time. Like, people would look at me like I'm, you know, it's like a beautiful thing that's happening. Oh, being young is so beautiful. This happens all the time. You're not going through anything that nobody else has gone through. But underneath it, I felt like I was dying.
Yeah, I'm really sorry you went through all of that. Yeah, thanks for sharing that with us. Yeah, I guess I also relate to what you're saying about, like, you know, being young and you're just supposed to be happy and, you know, adults kind of like dismiss what happens to you, because myself also went through experiences of abuse before I moved to Guåhan. So I guess like writing has been a big help for me, and just like expressing that through my zines and doing like trauma-informed work with like art practices has been really helpful to me. So I totally understand that. I guess like you feel this sense of, you know, just like painting as a way of like expressing like, you know, your deep emotions as well.
Definitely. I mean, it really helps me make sense of it, putting these like colors to represent something. I mean, the whole painting, if you look at it, it just feels like it's drenched in this like green, and, you know, like there's these little pieces of pink there that make it feel like very lush. And I guess it's also like the idea, I always told myself that if I ever made a movie, like the main point of the movie, I guess like aesthetically, like past like the plot, would to illustrate this idea of living on Guam, where it's like this beautiful paradise, but, you know, real stuff be happening, you know what I mean? Like, it's beautiful, but like just like the sun beating down on it. Because, you know, from a Western perspective, like, I feel like art is so important because it helps us make sense of like our life around us. You know, kids watch movies, you know, in the States because it tells them what it means to be a high schooler. Oh, I go to prom, I go to the basketball game, and I bike on the bicycle. You know what I mean? Like, that's what it means to be a teenager in America. But you can't watch a movie and learn what it means to be a teenager in Guam. And that's why I feel like it's so important to me to illustrate what that means, you know, because when you look and see what it means to be an islander, all you really ever see is like white people and tourists who like go to island to get away from something because it's a paradise and it's an escape and it's so beautiful and it's so lush. And I guess one big thing that I want to do with my art is show like, yeah, it is very beautiful, it is very lush, but underneath a lot of that is a very deep history that you can't ignore, and not just a history but also a present that you can't ignore.
Yeah, wow, that's beautiful. I guess, yeah, I totally understand what you're saying as well, and like kind of showing the realities of like, you know, what's happening to you and your real life experiences. I try to do that as well in like my academic practice as well. I try to write in my experiences as like an Asian woman and facing like, you know, discrimination and kind of just like being exotified as well, which I found like is totally the case here as well because of like, you know, US imperialism and like militarization. There's a lot of like, I don't know, stereotypes against like Asian women as well. And yeah, it was just a big shocker to me kind of like moving here and like understanding those things too. So yeah, definitely relatable.
I mean, like, that flower was brought here for the sole purpose of making Guam look more pretty. I mean, that's a lot of, like, the Puti Taino View. Like, they brought it here because they were going to have tourists come in and people visiting, and they wanted to make Guam seem, like, so beautiful. And, like, there's also a lot of that same idea when it comes to, like, Pacific Islander women of, like, you know, they were, like, sexualized, and their imagery was exploited and appropriated. I mean, there's like these whole ideas. I learned actually that a lot of when around World War II, when the first bombs that came in from Japan came on Guam, a lot of the white families knew about it and they were able to flee the island before it happened. But white men who were married to Chamorro women, the Chamorro women actually ended up staying here. And it was just so sad because it just made me feel like, man, like it just, like these women were disposable to these people. And like there's just story after story, usually by a white person, about a white man who like gets together with like any kind of woman of color and then just like leaves her and she's like heartbroken. And he's like, when is he gonna come back to me? And it's just like so sad that like this is how we've like, you know, that's how we write these women out to be. And I feel like in the painting that flower also has that same idea where it's like, it's just like this pretty thing. Like it's like this identity that we've put on real life people to just be like whatever I might have felt, because I felt like a lot of things, you know. I felt like nobody understood me and no one took me seriously, but I also felt like people thought I was manipulative and people thought that I was like trying to like, you know, orchestrate like what was happening. And you know, in the same way, it was like all of these very hypersexualized archetypes that people were putting on me, who I am also a teenager, you know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, but at the end of the day, it was all just to look pretty, you know what I mean? It's whether that be like how I actually look, like, you know, as a person, you know, as a young person. Oh, she's so like, she looks this way though, like how he's just a young guy, like how can he like help himself, but also just making the situation look prettier. Like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, this happens all the time, you know?
Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that. Even in like, I guess, an essay I wrote last year about my own experiences around survivorship, I talked about being like society just wanting you to be a good survivor. Like the good survivor is not reactive. She doesn't, you know, just like call out people, and she's not like crazy, basically, with quote marks. And like you're immediately a bad survivor if you discuss anything beyond that. Like you break beyond like, you know, some sort of like good woman stereotype where you're just like you know, talking openly and being honest about your experiences. And yeah, I just find what you shared, like, you know, I resonate with that.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like I totally, like, I'm just like going off with this. Like, I totally agree with what you're saying about being like a good survivor. And a big part of like the, I guess, symbolism of the painting is also that, like, being stagnant and feeling like you can't grow outside of like what you've come to define yourself by, you know what I mean? And of course, like, I'm never not going to define myself by my experiences, but sometimes it's like people tell you not to be this thing, and people tell you have to do it this way and you have to do it this way. And then all of that just like hurt and resentment and guilt and like just builds up in your heart. And sometimes it's like you start to isolate yourself from other people. It's because it's like, oh, it doesn't feel like anyone would understand at this point, and it just grows over you. And the same way that that vine grows over plants and stops them from growing, you know, that kind of heartbreak and betrayal has the potential to grow over somebody and also stop them from growing out as well.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. I think partially like I came to Guåhan as well because I felt so suffocated by my own community after being like honest about my own survivorship. And yeah, it just led to a lot of just like isolation within my peers, and like mostly those were like creatives as well. And yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from as well about like betrayal and all these feelings.
Okay, that being said, the final painting that I had a part of the zine was one of my first. I did not put up the finished one because I ended up like getting the opportunity to like add finishing touches to it. But the third painting was one that I did for the Guam Museum, a part of the Fanhita Manhoban conference, called the Patron Saint of Political Status. So that one has a lot of symbolism as well, and it's honestly one of my favorite things that I've ever painted. I painted it like last year, and I like had 2 days to paint it, and it was presented at the Guam Museum for about a couple months. And then my neighbor bought it. Before she bought it though, I got the opportunity to do all these touch-ups and add glitter, and it was great. Is there anything you'd like to say? Otherwise I'm just gonna go off about like what it represents to me. Ahead. Okay. So the painting is this lady on a carabao, and the whole point of it, I guess, is to represent our colonial history and the things that we're taking with us and the things that we're leaving behind as we, you know, pave our way and figure out what we're going to do from this point on, because obviously the status quo must go, and there's only really one way to go from here, and it's up. I mean, it's change, no matter what it is, whether or not we, you know, are able to get statehood, whether or not America wants to let us do that, or if we, you know, pursue independence, or we do a free association with America or some other power, you know, I mean, really, it's limitless. It is whatever we can make of it, right? Whatever we do, like, I think, like, part of it is remembering our colonial history as well, and like where we've come from, because a lot of those things have been embedded into CHamoru culture. She's on the carabao, the lady, walking towards this like big thing of water, and a big part of that is to, you know, represent as an island how the ocean is a big part of like, our identity as islanders, and it's the thing that connects us really to everybody else when it comes to, I guess, foreign relations and, like a free association. If we were to have a free association with America or any other world power, we would be connected to pretty much everybody just by water. And it's also about thinking about the way that the United States military contaminates our water and is really bad for us. And it's really about water. It's about life. It's about, first and foremost, our own physiological needs. Of course, culture is important, but at this point, the United States military is like threatening our own livelihood. And that's like, that should be the first and foremost. Like, if there's one thing that we can all connect on, it's literally water, as it's the ocean, right? And it's also water, like, even if you're not Chamorro, right? If Guam's not a safe place to live, that doesn't help anybody, no matter who you are. And so that's a big part of that. And then on the other side, it's fire, which represents both like destroying something completely and a complete chemical change. When you talk about science, you talk about physical changes and chemical changes. And all in all, I feel like the way that Guam's colonial history has shifted is something like a physical change, because what makes up Guam hasn't really changed. We've just kind of cut it up and given it different names and stamped like, oh, this is America's now. This is a new name. This is the what we really need is to kind of just like burn it all. Not what we really need to do is burn the colonial state to the no. What we really need to do is to make a change that doesn't just change the name of what we represent or change who's owning us, but change the entire system all in all. Like whatever, like, and again, I'm not saying that I have the answers, and I'm not saying that I know exactly what we need to do. All I know is that we need a change. So obviously on the other side, she's walking away from that fire, which also represents war. I mean, as they call us Guam, they literally call us the tip of the spear. And that's because we're such a strategic location for America in regards to war. I mean, that's how they acquired us anyways, was after the Second World War. And it's also obviously the reason why they acquired us. And, we are a people and we are a culture and a community that is more than just our proximity to America. And if people were more aware, they would know how dangerous it is to be this tip of the spear, human shield, pawns in somebody else's war. She's like around this big heart, and I guess it just represents like love. I always want love to be the main basis of like what I do and what I say. That's why I took it back a second when I was like, burn the colonial. So I was like, whoa, that was intense. I'm trying to learn how to be a better leader, and I know a big part of that is seeing where I can find common ground with the people around me. I will like confess, like, I definitely have a tendency to like be like, oh, I hate like all Howleys, and like I don't want to hear what anybody else has to say, but I like at the end of the day, it's like not like everybody else is gonna disappear. I mean, like if you are gonna be a good leader, you have to learn how to understand other people, and you can't just I guess like block other people out. And it's frustrating, and sometimes it feels like you want to get that way because people just like come here and then do really bad things, and then it just feels like I don't want anyone to come here ever again, but that's not going to happen, and it shouldn't happen, because you can learn a lot of great things from other people and find common ground with other people, and that helps you make solutions, because at the end of the day, Chamorros didn't just stay here and block out other people. That's not how we thrived as communities. We were navigators. We went and visited other islands, and we were visited by other people. We were visited by like pirates, and they said that we had like the best coconuts in all of the Pacific. Did you know that? That was really cool. We visited all these other places that taught us all these different things. They taught us like, we got a lot of inspiration by how we make our huts and stuff from other cultures. And so, yeah, I mean, that to say, it's all about love. Even though we've been hurt so much, we shouldn't let that get to our head and feel like this hatred towards I guess it is valid to feel like some kind of hatred towards the colonizer, but not that like, we want everybody to leave and that it's just like, does that make sense?
Yeah, but I feel like I do support the anger you have inside.
Yeah.
And I can really relate to that, especially like when I first started getting into activism as a teenager, like, you know, I felt all this anger, and I also like said similar things about, you know, all the things you talked about just now. And as the years went by, I still feel that inside, but I guess I'm less likely to feel like I'm gonna like yell that at someone, but still it's like, it's so valid, like that anger inside about how you're like treated by like white people, basically. I feel that. I still feel that as someone that's like in their late 20s, and I hope it's something that never goes away as well, because it feels like the work I do, and it feels like a lot of like community work, I think. Even if you like, you're more strategic about it on the outside, I still feel that, you know, and in a teenage or like in a child inside me being like, you know,
Oh,
like,
there's
the rage, pent up rage. Yeah.
There's always, I think there's definitely a place for rage, like all of the time. Like that's why I was saying, like, it's definitely valid, like the anger that you feel. And that isn't to say, and honestly, like one of my biggest pet peeves in general is like the idea of having to feel like you have to be strategic with what you say and be careful that you don't like hurt the white person's feelings. You know what I mean? Like, just like, why don't you just like educate yourself? Like if you only knew, you know what I mean? But like, you know, at the end, like, honestly, I'm talking all this about the importance of seeing other people through when, like, the literal same painting has, like, the American flag on fire. Like, I'm angry. Like, I feel like, I mean, I could sit here and talk for, like, hours about how I feel. Everything's so messed up and everything's white people's fault for not staying in their lane. But, you know, at the end of the day, I do feel like white people aren't just going to, like, disappear. And to be a leader, I think I have to, well, like, not to say that, like, I am a leader, I'm going to be a leader, but I would like to be a leader. And part of what I feel like is important for me to learn, at least, is to learn how to be, like, understanding of other people and try to think of these solutions that don't just accommodate myself, but also account for the lives of so many other people, because I can't get, like, too caught up in my own, like, you know, every mass genocide came from a nationalist movement. And I don't want to get too caught up with, like, my own, you know, indigenous Chamorro nationalism, no matter how pure and how like justified I think it might be, that it just like kind of overtakes, you know what I mean? Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing all of that with us. That was actually my next question to ask you. What kind of activism are you involved in? And I guess a question I did have is that like, as someone that's moved to Guåhan not too long ago, like I'm still trying to learn, like, you know, how to be a good ally and show solidarity with Chamorro communities. And I guess I don't know, I've met a lot of settlers of color, like migrants here, and, you know, they're not sure what to tell me when I'm like, how do I get more involved in like solidarity work? And you know, do you feel like that's the case? It's how do you find that? How do you feel like we can build more like migrant indigenous solidarities on island? Well, there's definitely like organizations that exist that are doing work, and you know, and you like as little as volunteering at the protests and keeping up with what they're doing, you know, I mean, even as little as like sharing resources on the internet, I mean, because that's really like the bare minimum but I definitely feel like it's all about connecting with the other organizers and stuff. There's so many people that would be happy to do work with you, you know, and if you know other people, you know, that you would want to get in contact with people here, you know, you just gotta like, I guess like network and tell them and, you know, think about people. But, you know, there's definitely people who have partnerships. Like I know like in Independent Guåhan, they've built like these partnerships with lawyers who are a part of the United Nations that have been helping us, like, you know, look into our case and like figure out some solutions, especially from like a political and like more technical, I guess, area where you can't just say that's wrong, but you have to prove it with laws for some reason. Like it's wrong, obviously, but unfortunately we live in this society where we've like structured all of this, like these complicated ways of oppressing people where you can't just be like, that's bad, you know? You have to prove it in a court of law, and you have to cite the thing that made it this thing, whatever, you know? And there's a space for everybody, you know? There's a space for the law people, you know? There's a space for artists who want to redefine like what it means to be Chamorro, or what it means to be diaspora, what it means to be migrant. There's a space for, you know, people who like to teach, and, you know, teaching to younger people like what certain things mean, and teaching them how they can get involved. It really depends on the kind of work you want to do, and I'm sure you can find people who have already established organizations dedicated to empowering that.
Is there anything else you'd like to share about your activism?
Well, I can tell you a little bit about the kind of work that I've done. I've been a part of quite a few different organizations, and I was a part of Guam Youth Climate Strike, Ihagan Famila in Guåhan, which was a women's group, is a women's group. I was a community member of GCC Eco Warriors and Independence Guåhan and Protect the Texan. So I've just done my best to be present at these different, you know, community meeting protests. I was like trying to use like I was like community getting together. Yeah, protests, and you know, going out there and also like meeting people, presenting testimonies and stuff. When like, you know, people go out and are looking for testimonies, I try to take one and write them out so I can explain, like, I guess writing has definitely been a great thing for me. The ways in which I like, I guess, express my activism is through written works and art.
So we're coming to the end, but obviously we follow each other on Instagram, and I noticed you love sharing memes just like me, and I was wondering, how does this intersect with your identity?
How do
even like as a Gen Zer, you know?
Memes intersect with my identity. Yeah, like I guess I've really grown up on the internet, and I think it's like funny, and like sometimes I forget like people know me in real life, like outside of my phone. People have joked around that like my Instagram is like their news reels, and I'm trying to like make what I post on Instagram as meaningful as possible. 'Cause you know, a lot of the time it's just like, I mean, I'm not trying to like call anybody out specifically, but a lot of people tend to associate being on social media a lot with being very self-absorbed. I mean, you're usually just taking pictures of yourself, or at least that's what most people are on social media to do. And I've tried to like, I guess, you know, because especially during the pandemic, being on social media has become such a big thing for me that I felt like pressured now to put stuff that actually like matters. And a lot of that had to do with like unfollowing a lot of people that I felt like, you know, didn't make me like think about things that were important. I mean, I followed a lot of beauty and a lot of fashion influencers, and you know, the type of stuff I'd see and the type of stuff that would like influence me would be stuff like how to style a brown miniskirt, or like how to test if your nose is good enough, you know. And it's like, you know. And so a lot of, I guess, memes that like, it's just like watching movies. I mean, it's just like consuming any other kind of media. It's like making sure the books that you're reading, just kind of doing a little double check, like, hold up, who is this author? The same way you would go, hold up, who is this person whose TikToks I watch all of the time, and like, what do they stand for? And doing research and talking to friends. And I guess, I mean, it's not hard work. I was going to say doing the work, but it's not work to find cool Instagram people, you know? But the ways in the kind of creators that I've been trying to follow are like artists and people who post about current events. And I just like things that are funny, but things that are funny that also matter. You know, people who can make jokes about things that are happening, and I can be like, ha ha ha, but damn, that's true though, you know?
Yeah, I love all the memes you share about like girlhood, and I just find it so relatable around like queerness, especially. I think like being on Instagram and like meme accounts have really helped me unpack like my own queer identity as well.
Definitely. I mean, definitely like with girlhood. And I was talking about how like being on the internet, it has also created this space for people who never felt like they belong and never felt like they saw their stories being told. And oh my God, I don't feel like I see my stories being told. You get to see those things worded out and processed by other people, like so many people. There's just like a space for everybody. Of course there's a space for you. And you know, I'm not even like the person who writes these memes, you know, like my friend, one of my, like, I love like those like girl bloggers, is that what they call them? And they say that, like, and by they I mean Ralph Waldo Emerson. I just read a quote in your partner's book library. He said that geniuses something along the lines of geniuses like articulate things that like we can't articulate ourselves. And that makes me think like, man, we all like have these ideas, and it's just really up to somebody who puts it into words. And memes are so like tiny and consumable. It's just like this little tidbit of like, damn, that's so real though, you know?
Yeah, but it also goes back to that, you know, you talked about how Amanda viewed your painting and they saw something completely different. And it's like, sometimes I just see like a meme of like Bratz doll, and it'll have some funny text, and I'll be like, wow, that's so relatable about my existence. Like, I don't know, it just has that effect. Like, memes, like girlhood memes, I guess.
Girlhood memes for real.
Yeah.
There is still, I mean, like, we've definitely come a long way, and I'm not going to sit here and be like, there are no movies about what it's like to, there's so many movies about what it's like to be a girl. But sometimes, you know, it feels like a lot of the movies still don't really encapsulate girlhood, really. I mean, like, I still feel like girlhood has been kind of co-opted in the way that it's like told by men, you know what I mean? Just to be palatable to other people, or to look, you know, I guess endearing in some kind of way. And, you know, like, yeah, girlhood for real. And its memes are so accessible both to make, to republish, and to consume, that it's just like it's a great way. It's like an ocean for real. Like, it is really just like a big ocean that connects a lot of people.
Yeah, I think in terms of girlhood as well, like there's always that like idea of like, or like white women always tell like our stories of like girls of color, and it's always just like, oh, there's some racism, there's some sexism, they come from a conservative family, and then, you know, they go through some like event, and then suddenly their life is better, and it's just some perfect coming of age story, and it's
That's
like
true.
That shit never ends, you know?
Yeah. Like I was just talking about, like, you know, there's so many movies that show you how to be a white teenager. Like, I mean, at least like, because Guam is colonized by America currently, and so a lot of the media that we consume is very Western. I mean, when you go on TV, like the TV that we watch is from America, and from the get-go, you already know that these aren't for us. I mean, like, I remember watching Cartoon Network, and they would always have a segment where they would talk about like what day it was, and it would never be Guam, right? Because Guam was always a day ahead. And I just remember like seeing that and like asking my dad, like, why isn't it, that's not right, that's not the right time. And my dad's like, oh, well, this is like this is, you know, this is an American broadcasting station or whatever, and so obviously it's like the American. And I was like, but that wasn't obvious to me at the time, and it was just like, whoa, like it just changed the way I realized things. And for a long time, especially in middle school, I was very insecure about like my life, and I was like, I didn't feel like I had enough fun. Like, I didn't go, and like my neighborhood, like at least my village isn't like, I don't bike around and go on adventures with my friends like the white teenagers in the movies that I felt like I was supposed to emulate, you know? And yeah, going back to memes and white women who write stories about women of color, yeah, it's like the characters that we are written out to be just don't resonate with me at all. And if there's at least one place where I can find like solace, it's in memes.
Yeah, I don't know. There's just something about memes that I think I sent you that meme, like, I'm not an e-girl, I'm a philosopher. And I don't know why that was just so relatable.
I love that.
I was like, that's the work. I feel like I'm encapsulating or embodying this meme right now with this, you know, academic essay I'm writing. And then I'm like, I don't really know how to explain this. Yeah, it's just some sort of like, it's just so relatable. I don't know.
Yeah, it's so relatable, and it's given us a space to like, I guess, ponder these ideas where otherwise you'd be like, no, stop thinking about that. Like, nobody wants to hear about that, you know? But I guess like on the internet, no one can really tell you that, you know? It's like, it's my page. If you don't want to hear about it, just unfollow me, you know what I mean? And yeah, it's really cool. I mean, I guess to a certain extent, it's like you still gotta watch yourself, and it's like you can't get too caught up in your own head and be like, you know? But I mean, it's social media. It's not me, myself, and I media. You know what I mean? Like, though I was just talking about how I consume media from other people, and honestly, like, that's really a great way to, I guess, counter the bads of social media is also the goods of social media. That was not a profound point at all, but yeah.
I was gonna say, I definitely feel like really comfortable like sharing on my Instagram and sharing all these memes and things, and I found myself really comfortable expressing my identity there. But do you find that as someone like coming from a younger generation that grew up with digital technology, like how do you differentiate between the online self and the, you know, physical self? Is it different, or do you feel like they're fused together?
I honestly feel like they're fused together. There might have been a point in time where like they weren't. One of the biggest things that like I've tried to do with my Instagram is like totally cut out like the middle, like, you know, the need to like curate, like, oh, it's 12 p.m. I must post for engagement. Like, it's not even about that anymore, you know? It's really, to me, it's just like my little digital scrapbook, you know? It's just because photos on my phone are just like the easiest thing ever, you know? And I like to share memes, and I like to snap a photo here and there and share it. And, you know, it's definitely like my way of staying in contact with people. And it's also like my way of sharing things that I feel like matter to me. And at the end of the day, it's like now at least right now that the things that I share on my Instagram, it's all about being meaningful. It's all about talking about things that matter and bringing awareness to things that people might not really know about and sharing my own ideas. It hasn't felt like something of a chore to keep up with it. You know, it hasn't felt like, oh, great, now I have to edit this picture of my selfie so I can post it to my followers, you know? It's more like I'm on the toilet and I'm like, I want to talk about the settler colonial state, you know?
Yeah,
like,
definitely. Yeah, I think I also just used when Instagram first came out, I felt like the need to like put on some image as well, like you said about posting at a certain time for engagement, and in hindsight it feels very silly, but nowadays I'm just like, this is just a place for me to like share photos and like post really I don't know, silly girl memes and yeah, connect with other people. I think that's the biggest use I've had with my IG since coming like on island. Like I've connected with so many great people, including you, on social media, and I'm just really like grateful for that. And yeah, just like being able to just share memes to connect with people instead of like having a full-blown conversation has like been very helpful as well.
Yeah, actually that's true too. Like, you know, there's like sometimes people will like my memes and it's like, I never thought you would think this is like relatable at all, you know? And it's just cool because it's like people kind of from a safe distance are able to look into my life and see like and understand parts of me that otherwise we probably would have never been able to talk about, you know? And I just think that's really cool. And I'm like, you know, I feel like that's what social media really should be for. You know what I mean? And yeah, at least at its best, that's what you should use it for.
Okay, so we're coming to the end of the episode. And the last thing I wanted to talk to you about is, are there 3 pieces of media that you'd like to share with our audience that you've enjoyed lately or you've just found really significant to you?
Okay, I created a list and it was not 3. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It was 5. Okay. I have 5 things that I'd like to mention. So number 1, I really like Mina Lei on YouTube. I don't like YouTube. Like I don't have the attention span for YouTube. I have to get off TikTok because it's like, I feel like it's ruined my attention span because if something's longer than like a minute, I don't want anything to do with it. But Mina Lei is one of the only like content creators online that I can literally listen to talk. Honestly, I'm not even a podcast person. I'm sorry. Like podcasters are great and it has nothing to do with them. I'm not a podcast person, but it has nothing to do with podcasts. It's because it's because every time I try to listen to a podcast, I'll start zoning out and forgetting what they said. And I can't like rewind it because it's like, I don't have anything to base off of it. You know, when you're watching a movie and you're like, oh, I was at the part where they were inside the car. There's no way for me to rewind a TED Talk because the entire frame is just the guy at the TED Talk. So I was never really a podcast person, but I can listen to Mina Lei talk for a really long time. She's just one of my favorite content creators. Like there's so much I have to say, but also not like too much wouldn't even be enough. You know, she's a really well sort like one thing as like someone who consumes like information from other people, like one of the biggest things is like trying to find people who cite their sources, I guess. She like cites her sources, but she also gives like further reading for people. She talks about all different sorts of things, and she finds the intersections between things that happen currently and in history with art, and how that's affected, you know, like popular media, pop culture, and like fashion and all that. Because, you know, especially as like a young person, it's like pop culture and art really make up like a lot of who I am. Like I was just saying, like, you watch movies to figure out how you are to be a good whatever you are, you know? And Mina Lei really sees the importance of culture in movies. And like, I mean, she did a whole like 30-minute talk on how all, you know, those like really white statues, like the ones that are like supposed to look like marble. She talked about how those are associated with like fantasies about ancient Rome and this like this history of empires, and how we've kind of romanticized them as the pinnacle of society. And I was like, all that, you know, and it's true too. It's not even a stretch, because if you listen to her, it's all connected. And that, yeah, I love her. Capping that, my next favorite, another favorite like thing that I've really liked, I really like the show Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, written by Rachel Bloom and Anne-Marie Baldonado. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah, I love that show. I saw it ages ago. Yeah, it has such good like depictions of mental health.
Oh, it's so good. I just love it. I mean, I love all the songs. I love like Rachel's like personality. I watched it very recently. I like, oh my God, I recently just finished it. And you know, even though like Rachel and I don't have like the same, Rebecca and I don't have like the same, I guess, exact same identities. You know, she's like from an upper class family. She's this Jewish girl who goes into like law. But a lot of like her story, I mean, the whole thing comes up to the idea that, oh, I need to figure out who I am. And I feel like I know who I am. So even though we don't have the same exact struggles, a lot of the things she goes through, and even the things that the other people go through, they just shed this light on all these identities that normally aren't talked about in TVs and movies. And, you know, as I was saying, we watch movies to see how to be the correct kind of whatever. And, you know, there's all the different characters. There's like Paula, who's like this mom who's struggling with, you know, her career and also being a mother. There's like Josh, who doesn't think a lot about the things around him. And, you know, all the characters are kind of based off of these archetypes, but they just kind of fully flesh out into such human characters that, you know, you can see a part of yourself in all of them. And as I said earlier, a big thing about art is you should try to make something that both is unique, but also strikes a common chord in everybody, you know?
I love the flawed characters, actually. That's one of my favorite things about the show. And also I find the storyline with how she obsesses over Josh, like, just really funny. I don't know, like, the way they depict it is just so good.
Yeah, I mean, for so long, and the show even, like, combats this literally, like, the way that we kind of write about women, and I experienced this, you know, like, even the whole painting Kadena Dearmore kind of has a little bit to do with this, in the way that, like, what is a good, you know, I mean, Rachel wasn't abused by Josh or anything, but she went through a lot of hardships with her mother, and that's affected, like, her relationships with other people. And she talks about literally how, you know, like, there's this, like, scene where it has a Easter egg where she's, like, where she has, like, a rental DVD of Fatal Attractions. And I don't know if you ever know that, but that movie scarred me, but not for the same reasons it scarred everyone else. It scarred me because I watched it and I was like, damn, she's just like me for real. But she's like the villain. And, you know, like, women who are hurt and done wrong by people and act out about it are always written out to be villains, because it goes against what we think a woman should be. When a man fights for love and fights for the righteousness, it's always seemed as epic and he's a hero. But, like, when women fight for what they think is right, it's usually never really understood, because people don't really like listening to women sometimes, you know, and if they don't understand what she's saying from the get-go, they're like, oh, she's crazy, like I don't even want to hear it, you know.
Yeah, or she has to like say articulate it in this perfectly logical way.
Yeah,
like the minute she shows emotion, it will be like, oh, it's game over. Yeah, but of course if a man does that, they're just like, oh, he's vulnerable, he's great, he's an amazing person. Definitely.
I mean, like when a woman is like articulate and strategic in the things she says, she's manipulative, and like she's trying to watch what she's saying because she's a wench, a manipulator, you know, she's a femme fatale, you know, whatever. But then when a woman's emotional, she's crazy, she's so emotional, she's neurotic, you know. It's like really, like there really is no winning in the ways in which when a man does anything, he's always winning, you know. Like when a man is like stoic and strategic, he's stoic and strategic. And when a man's emotional, like you're just saying, he's like applauded for being vulnerable and like seeing in his emotions, you know? Finally, one of my last ones, not really something I've been into recently, but it's just my favorite movie of all time, is Hedwig and the Angry Inch. Also written and directed and starring John Cameron Mitchell. I just realized like all of my favorite things are written by the same people who star in them. And before we start talking about this movie, I feel like social media is also something that kind of has that same idea, where it's like, unlike movies, there's not a bunch of people who are sitting there and like dictating whatever. Like I am the person who writes the things that I say, and I'm the person who says what I say, and I'm the person who is in charge of how I appear when I say those things. And I just realized when I was doing research for this, I looked up the movies and I looked up the directors, that the people that I'm like, both my two favorite shows and movies are written by the same people who star in them. And I think that really like just resonates with me, being able to see people display themselves how they choose to be displayed and tell their stories, you know, the way that they want them to be told. And this movie is a great movie. It's really complicated. It's about this gay guy who's living in East Berlin who wants to move away to escape. If like there's the wall that they put up, and he wants to escape it, so he marries this military GI who's visiting, and the military GI kind of just ends up peer pressuring him into receiving a sex change surgery to sneak over the border. And so then she changes her pronouns to she, her, and takes her mom's name, Hedwig, and the sex surgery ends up like not going well. And so they kind of aren't really like, they kind of just feel like this anomaly in the sense that like they weren't really supposed to be in Berlin, but they aren't even really supposed to be an American either. And they don't feel like they identify as any kind of really gender. And it's them kind of exploring that. And the whole story is about how Hedwig becomes obsessed with this guy who they dated, and then they steal all of Hedwig's songs and then go off and get famous off of Hedwig's songs. And this kid is like, this little teenage boy sucks. He sucks. And he's like the worst, but he's like this little whiny guy, and he's like emotional, and he's like, he has his hair, and he's like just like this regular teenage boy, and he gets famous off of Hedwig's songs. And Hedwig's like trying to come out about like, oh, these are all my songs, and how the media is like, oh, you know, like Hedwig's manager is like, maybe we shouldn't follow him around anymore because you're going to seem like a stalker. And then, you know, it's like, it's really complicated, but it just tells a lot about Hedwig. It's also based off of the story, Plato's Symposium, talking about the origin of love, and how Hedwig becomes obsessed with this philosopher's idea that, oh, if I find love, I can complete myself. I don't feel like I belong here. I don't feel like I am really anything. And if I find love, it will make everything make sense. And Hedwig becomes so obsessed with finding love and thinking that that's how she's going to escape, because she uses it to escape her situation. And then the American GI just leaves her for a younger boy. And then she just feels like, oh my God. And then this other person that she fell in love with ends up leaving her with her songs. And it's like, it's her whole adventure, and it just resonates with me so much. And even Rachel's, just the idea of like realizing that you have all the answers within you and you don't need like something to complete you just resonates with me so much.
I'm definitely going to check out the movie now. It sounds very interesting. But yeah, so we've come to an end with our recording, and yeah, thank you so much for being on the podcast and for sharing all your movies as well. And yeah, I hope you have a great day ahead.
You too. Thank you so much, Sinajaña, for having me on the podcast. It was really great, and I really enjoyed, getting to know your experiences and also sharing a little bit about my art and my movie recs and Instagram memes. I've never been in a professional setting talking about that, and I thought that was really fun. Thank you for giving me that opportunity.
Thank you. And is there any advice you'd like to leave our listeners?
Always a complicated question that I can never give a straight answer to. Advice. Well, I guess my advice is to, look in yourself and know that like you are always complete within yourself. Take time to learn around you about, if you're Chamorro, take time to learn about your history here. And if you're not Chamorro, take time to learn about what our history is here and how you can help out that with everything that's been happening, because there is a lot of things that are wrong right now, not just in this island, but in this world. And the only way we can really combat those things is together. Sana mo asi, nago poengi, and yeah, that's a wrap. Thank you.